Okay, it is about 12:01. I promised I would get started. We're going to have some people rolling in as they tend to, but we're gonna kick things off here. Welcome to the Machine Metrics webinar series. This is the state of the industry. The future is now for remote work. We're really excited for this. I believe our sixth in this series so far. We really appreciate you all joining us today. The COVID-19 pandemic has forced many manufacturers worldwide to adjust to changes in both demand for the product and services that they offer, as well as to pivot their workforce practices to comply with health-related restrictions. Every day, another challenge seems to arise to the growing impact. And it's left many companies rushing to implement new processes to minimize the operational impact of these changes. Whether or not government policy exists to prevent the physical presence of employees on a shop floor, for example, there has been a strong shift among manufacturers towards remote work strategies. Thus, remote working has really become the new norm. But for certain jobs, especially within manufacturing, it can present a significant challenge. In an industry dominated by human-machine interaction, factories depend on operators to keep machines running, and it's simply not possible today for them to work remotely. It is possible, however, to significantly reduce the number of people needed to maintain operations. One thing is for certain. By enabling mobile workforce, industrial companies are better able to ensure the safety of their workers while continuing to serve their customers. But is this merely a temporary solution to keep factories running, or really representative of a paradigm shift that will accelerate the digital transformation of manufacturing? For those of you who are not familiar with my voice yet by now, my name is Graham Immerman, and I am your host and moderator for today, the VP of Marketing at Machine Metrics. Very excited for our panelists. We're thankful to have Ben Wald, founder and head of client strategy at Very, and Sandy D'Souza back with us, director of strategic alliances at Fiix. Give them a wave, guys. Thanks. Couldn't be any happier to have them today. Awesome panel. Before we get started, just a couple housekeeping notes. This webinar is being recorded. Fear not. We will send out a link to the recording after the webinar. Questions are not only welcome, but are encouraged. Please use the Q&A within the Zoom navigation to ask a question at any time. We will have time for Q&A at the end, but as questions arise during the presentation, we can try to weave in our responses to those in real time. So please do not hesitate, do not hold back any questions that you may have along the process. A review of our agenda. We're gonna do a brief introduction, which essentially we're doing right now. Obligatory and quick company presentations for those of you who are not familiar with either Machine Metrics, Very, or Fiix. And we're gonna hop into the main event, which is the live discussion around remote work and the future of remote work for manufacturing. We'll have a brief Q&A and talk a little bit about what's coming next within this series. As part of our response to the COVID crisis, Machine Metrics has launched a COVID-19 response program that will, we are providing our platform and consulting services for free to any manufacturer who is producing and or in the production of ventilator-related components or medical devices related to the treatment of COVID-19. We hope that our support will help these companies continue to produce these life-saving solutions in a time of need. Feel free to check that out. It's at machinemetrics.com/COVID-19-response. we're also really excited for our next State of the Industry, which will be happening on June 23rd from 1 to 2 p.m. We'll be looking at the impact of COVID-19 on the economy. We're thankful to have representatives from NAM, the National Association of Manufacturers, as well as Jerry Foster, the CTO of Plex, who will be joining us for that webinar. That's from June 23rd, 1 to 2 p.m. You can register now through the Machine Metrics website. Now on to our first segment, a brief introduction for those of you who are not familiar with Machine Metrics. Machine Metrics is manufacturing's industrial IoT platform for machines. So Machine Metrics, our objective is to accelerate industrial digital transformation by providing an intuitive and flexible platform to easily collect data from any piece of manufacturing equipment and transform that data into powerful applications that reduce machine downtime, optimize capacity utilization and throughput, and drive more profitability for factories. Right now, hundreds of manufacturers have connected Machine Metrics to their machines across global factories. Our platform is focused on enabling these companies to deliver the right information to the right person at the right time so they can improve their machining performance, increase their productivity, and ultimately win more business and remain globally competitive. Most shop floor digital transformation initiatives are stifled by an inability to get usable data from manufacturing equipment. Manual data collection is time consuming and inaccurate and leads to inefficiencies that affect every component of a company's operation. Because most manufacturing equipment generates hundreds of data points every millisecond, that data can provide unique insights into what's happened in the past, what's happening now, and what will happen in the future. So the foundation of our platform is the automated capture and transformation of machine data to allow you to harness that data to drive your factory's digital transformation. Our Edge platform is plug and play with PLCs, and we provide digital and analog I/O sensors to transform machine data into standard structures across your entire fleet. That capability enables consumable machine data and insights in a matter of minutes. Data is then instantly and securely streamed to the Machine Metrics cloud via Ethernet, Wi-Fi, or cellular. Our multi-tenant cloud platform leverages that custom infrastructure that we built to enable instant analytics and insights, including machine performance and condition monitoring and reporting, as well as upstream and downstream communication to any of your shop floor systems, ERP, CMMS, quality management, or your own data lake if you'd like to empower your own predictive analytics capabilities. Finally, out-of-the-box apps deliver use cases that drive immediate actionability on that data. Real-time shop floor dashboards, historical reporting, rules-based workflows, text email notifications that deliver optimized processes to your factory workers. You can build your own apps, seamlessly connect your shop floor systems to our system to easily integrate machine data across the digital factory. Our objective is to significantly expedite the time to value for Industry 4.0 by putting that data to work immediately and providing that foundation for IoT to scale across the organization. So that's a little bit about us, but I want to introduce Sandy from Fiix, who's going to tell you a little bit about what they do.
Awesome. Thanks, Graham. Thank you, everybody, for joining today. If we could go to the next slide. Let's go one more. We'll keep the slides a little bit light. Again, thank you everybody for joining. A bit of a background on Fiix. So we are a cloud-based CMMS solution, been around for over 10 years. Really, there's two key things that makes Fiix unique. So number one, we were the first CMMS solution in the market to really take a very user-centric approach to how we design the software, how we design the interface, how we enable the mobile workforce when it comes to maintenance technicians. And then we took that foundation, we took that really that design philosophy, and we applied industry best practices and layered that in throughout the software, so that as organizations adopt software perhaps for the first time when it comes to managing their maintenance, they're really able to adopt the software effectively and transform their business and achieve their objectives. In terms of the software itself, really 4 key areas that we focus on. So number 1 is getting all of your data in, and this is really very asset centric. So when you think about the assets, we tend to think of them in really 2 different ways. So your static information related to assets, as well as any dynamic information that relates to the assets as well, which we'll touch on here in a second. Second component is workflow management. So how do I manage maintenance against those assets? So things like preventative maintenance, things like reactive maintenance, perhaps. And then thirdly, we think about analytics. So how do I get insight now that I have all my data into a system, now that I'm interacting with that data using things like work orders? How do I understand, what is the performance of my maintenance department? What is the impact of maintenance on production systems? Really, how do I get a better understanding of, where am I excelling? Where can I improve? And so forth. The last component, and very pertinent to today's conversation, is around connectivity. So we're very focused on providing the best maintenance tool in the market, very focused on the mobile technician, very focused on the maintenance department, very focused, quite frankly, on the workflow itself. We realize that all of our clients, all of our prospective clients, they also use other business systems. They also use other equipment. So of course, we provide a seamless way to integrate with those other pieces of software and or the other hardware. So when we think about business systems like that you see on the right side of the screen, typically the integration point is really centered around keeping things like your accounting controls, such as inventory on hand, any financial records, so the valuation of that inventory, any of your process controls, such as purchasing controls, maintaining all of those processes in the ERP, which in that case would be the system of record, while allowing the maintenance department to really work within one system that's optimized for their day-to-day workflows, such as Fiix, and really being able to then interact with that data that exists perhaps in the ERP. On the left side of the screen, and this is what's really interesting about today's conversation, is connectivity to production systems. So when we think about connectivity to production systems, really this is kind of where we feel that remote work gets enabled. Now you're able to pull data from equipment like Graham mentioned and take action against that data. It could be something simple like generating preventative maintenance based on usage. But as you go further down the road, you really then could gain an understanding of what's going on the shop floor, given certain maintenance activities that may have occurred in the past, what's going on the shop floor when I maintain equipment perhaps in a different way, and really then using these insights to drive change and drive improvement over time. So as an organization, we'll always continue to invest in providing the best mobile and the most optimized maintenance experience for the maintenance department, while at the same time, really provide seamless connectivity to any business system and any production system that's on the market today. So really looking forward to diving in later in our discussion around remote work and how that's all made possible using the Fiix CMMS platform.
Thanks for that, Sandy. And love the philosophy on interconnected systems, aligning best in breed systems to connect. Don't always have to rebuild the wheel. Also thankful to have Ben Wald here from Very. Ben, would you tell us a little bit about what you guys do?
Yeah. I'm excited to get into the conversation here. I'm going to rip through these slides so we can get to it. So we build custom IoT solutions. Next slide. We've been around for a little over 8 years. We've launched 250 products for clients. We've got now almost 100 full-time team members that are spread across our different practices. That is mechanical engineering, electrical engineering, the software side of things, design and data science. Next slide. Specifically, these are, the different services that we offer to clients. We partner with both manufacturers and machine builders and also consumer electronic companies to build out their connected systems. Next slide. A little bit about how we work, laying the foundation. We get the tools spun up. We work remotely. Our whole team is remote. So we help our clients kind of get spun up on Slack and some of the tools that we use. We always start with the technical design sprint, a feasibility study. When we're working together, we're jamming, we're using Slack, we're working iteratively in an agile approach. And after we launch the product, we provide ongoing support. A couple fun examples. This one is a machine builder that builds beer taps that people are able to self-serve using facial recognition in a mobile app. Next slide. And the largest manufacturer of fish tanks leveraged our engineering team to build out their IoT connectivity. And that's it. Let's dive into it.
Awesome. Very cool. I want to hear more about that fish tank use case at another time.
Not the beer tap, the fish tank is what you want to talk about?
And yeah, for those of you, the questions that are coming in, this is not a Moscow Mule. It is just a Moscow Mule cup. Question answered. All right, so let's dive right into the the discussion here, right? So Ben kind of touched on a really interesting point, right? For technology companies like us, we use a tech stack that in many ways primes us for remote work. Many of us are developing products using like code-based technology. We use Slack, we use email, we use Zoom. The question really is the majority of manufacturers have to find ways to go remote. Is this really, firstly, is this really because of COVID-19? Or has there been an ongoing trend that's currently accelerating? Ben, you want to start and then move to Sandy?
Yeah, sure. I think this is definitely a trend that we've been seeing now for a while. I think there are some things that, because of like the physical dimensions of what's being worked on, is very hard to go remote. But there are also a lot of jobs that are, even in a manufacturing setting, that can be done remotely, and there are huge benefits to being able to transition those jobs remotely. The question is always going to be about tools. It's going to be about process. It's about people. And I think later in this discussion today, I can touch on some of those specifically. I've seen this for a while. We've been working with clients on various initiatives around like digital transformation. Also as a little bit of a kind of a byproduct of our engagements, where we are using tools like Slack. We're using kind of cloud-based workflow tools. A lot of the times we're onboarding some of our clients into those tools. And so we've experienced that with construction companies that are resistant to adopting new technology, and kind of runs the gamut. So we've been seeing it for a while. There's definitely a spotlight on it now because of COVID, but I think it's a strong trend. It's the right trend for a lot of reasons.
Sandy?
Yeah, I kind of think of remote, especially in the context of our clients, to a certain degree. It's a little bit of a false choice. It's not a binary decision. And I think Ben touched on this a little bit. You're not going to go 100% remote. You're not going to go 100%, on the floor anymore, perhaps. But frankly, what we've seen for years, clients have come to us because they want to drive improvement in OEE. So availability, performance, and quality. And when we think about those three categories, maintenance plays a huge role in driving all three of those metrics. So clients have been coming to us, and 80% of our customers, mid-market and large enterprise manufacturers, they come off paper, pen, or some kind of legacy software solution that was not really well adopted in the past. So they're really going at software for the first time. They're really transforming operations for the first time. And so, when you think about going remote, for many of our clients, step one is, how do I start using software so now I can begin to track my systems, track my process, track my productivity, track the maintenance metrics that I want to track. And really an output of that then is the ability to do certain things remotely. So perhaps in the past, you may have required or relied on a line manager to provide information about checklists that may or may not have been done during certain shifts. Once organizations adopt software like ours, that information is being collected and being shared and distributed in near time. So as those checklists are performed on the shop floor, now the manager, wherever that manager happens to be located, is able to see that. So, when we think about remote, I feel like this phenomenon has been going on for a while. What I have seen is really an acceleration in the adoption of tools to make remote more effective, if that makes any sense.
It does. It's interesting. We looked at it very similar to both of you, and I prefer maybe my response may be more total, but you have kind of two different transformations. One of which is in some ways a product of the times that is accelerated, and one is simply just a product of having technology to do it and the reason to do it. A good example is in today's factories. When factories almost immediately shut down and weren't even letting visitors in, when machines experienced maintenance issues that were maybe not something that were privy to the responsibility of the internal maintenance team, and oftentimes would be say sent out to a machine builder, they could not have that same on-site experience. Right? They couldn't bring the technician in. The factory was locked down, right? So what does this factory do? Right now, the product of the people using machine metrics, for example, was that we can enable remote access to that machine data, and that became an imperative use case in this time. Was machine builders needed access to help keep the machines up and running for their manufacturers. Manufacturers needed their machines to get back up and running. So in some ways, just having the technology there, right, and then the reason to facilitate that use case is how we saw that trend accelerated. However, I think to both of your points, having the baseline of technology makes it much easier for certain employees to go remote, right? Like I said, we're using Slack all day, so the difference between maybe like communicating in person versus communicating on Slack, not that big a change, right? But you're on the factory floor, right? Many of our customers would walk around, and like you said, paper and pen, collect data that way, right? That was the process. Right? Or, how do you, know how many good parts you're making after every job run, right? And that was, a manually done task. But, a byproduct of having, something like machine metrics, for example, on the shop floor, is that job doesn't need to be manual anymore. So when social distancing, right, when, health concerns are an issue, it becomes evident, right? That that these tasks are not even necessary, not just in COVID times, but generally not really necessary to be done, which is an impetus for a much longer term acceleration. And I think this kind of leads me to the next topic, right? It's like, for some roles, is work from home realistic, right? You have management's goal, of course, right, is to eventually kind of replace, as many manual operations as possible. But what does a roadmap look like for certain companies to get started today? Maybe certain things are, a bit of a reach, but what can manufacturers do today? What roles can they take on to start looking at and say, hey, maybe we can take these things remote? Start with Ben.
Yeah, I'm happy to dive in here. So what I would start with is looking at it from a little bit of the opposite perspective, which is what roles can't go remote. And I think if you start from that perspective and you kind of build from that direction, you realize that there are probably a very few roles that require people to be on site, that require kind of hands-on machines, but you can actually move almost everybody into a remote or a work from home environment. And we have a company that has full-time electrical engineers, mechanical engineers, firmware engineers, and we have now a team that is 100% distributed. And a lot of the times, it's easy to look at software engineering, say, okay, like that can go remote, like well-established cloud-based tools, GitHub, workflows that kind of have already embraced this, but when you start to get into some of the more physical roles of mechanical engineering, electrical engineering, and how they're collaborating with firmware engineers and the embedded engineers, then it starts to get a little bit more challenging. But I am here to say that it is absolutely possible. It's possible to equip people with the right tooling at their home office for them to be able to work effectively from home and collaborate remotely. So, a couple things that we use is we equip our folks with a Volterra machine to allow them to quickly prototype components, hardware and firmware interactions. Some of our engineers, most of our engineers are using Onshape as CAD software, which is, fully in the cloud. Right. And a lot of the tools that we're going through are totally integrated into a cloud-based workflow so that people can collaborate remotely. And so my first thing here is that working from home for the majority of the organization is going to be more efficient. And most importantly, you get to ask people, what's the environment in which you're going to do your best work? And for most people, that's not sitting in a cubicle and in some like open floor plan office where there are tons of distractions. And I think if you ask most people if they really want to commute in the morning to an office building, the answer is going to be no. And so our story has been, we started the company 9 years ago with a remote first mindset, but at that time, as a young company, we felt like we needed to have an office and a fancy conference room, and some of the like older philosophies around just like business. We need a gathering place. We need a place to bring clients to. So, long story short, we ended up purchasing a building in downtown Chattanooga, Tennessee, which was kind of our corporate HQ. We did like a full build out, had an 8,000 square foot floor plan on this like historic building in downtown Chattanooga. It was an awesome building, loved the building. And we had probably around 15, 16 full-time folks in Chattanooga. Long story short, only 3 or 4 of them actually went to the office. And honestly, as a technology company, no matter how many different conference room tools that we tried to embrace, and it was like, High Five or Blue Jean or, all these different like AV setups, we could never figure out like high quality communications from this conference room. And it was always higher quality communications, people just using like great gear, great headset, great home internet connection. So a couple of years ago, we sold the building, we went officeless as a company, and we've been better for it. And so I'm here to say that I would look at the problem and say what roles absolutely have to be on site, and then kind of start from there and try to problem solve about how can you take these other roles remotely.
Yeah, we were talking about this earlier, Graham, but I kind of feel like as software companies, going remote is a little bit more trivial compared to what it's like for many of the clients that we work with, where you've got a physical facility, you're producing physical goods. Obviously, not every role can go remote. But what's interesting is, as I mentioned, kind of in the preamble, we've seen this increasing trend towards adopting technology and integrating technology to allow you to maintain equipment based on actual utilization and based on actual asset health. So as we think about remote, and again, it's not going to be binary necessarily, but instead of performing preventative maintenance based on a time-based schedule, what if you could do, one fewer monthly PM as an example, prevent someone from having to go into the office, prevent someone from having to touch the equipment and potentially, increase the risk of, safety-related issues or breakdowns that occur from that actual PM task itself. I'll give a shout out to Terrence O'Hanlon from Reliability Web. He's big on, and I'm paraphrasing a little bit, but unnecessary maintenance can cause unnecessary breakdowns. So, as we think about layering in data and technology, when we think about the data that Machine Metrics collects, and you think about Fiix being the actionable endpoint for that data, and our clients are on a continuum along this journey. So whether it's usage-based maintenance or even condition-based maintenance, really the underlying philosophy is maintain equipment when necessary, not based on a time schedule that, in some cases could be arbitrary. And by doing that, you're really driving that remote culture in a small way, but it's an incremental step that really creates significant value, not only from the standpoint of OE, but certainly from the standpoint of achieving a broader objective of moving towards a more remote culture.
Yeah, and to that end, right? Something that we see, right, as a company is, they're almost seeing, the roadmap to automation, right? In the future, right? We definitely see, more of a system that adapts, right, based on data, right? And data will drive the decision when it's time to do the maintenance, when it's time to stop a machine, when it's time to change the tool, when it's time for a setup to be done, a changeover, so on and so forth. But that in those systems, which we definitely hope to move towards in the future, need to have a starting point, right? So I think to Ben's point, which I thought was a really good one, focusing on maybe what jobs cannot necessarily go remote today may actually provide a nice kind of guiding point to looking at, all right, how do we enable those people to do the job that they have to do? And then which ones can we kind of move remote first? And, even to push back on that a little bit though, some companies, right, see sales as something that has to be done in person, right? And I think this is a common, change in conception, right? Manufacturing industry that's been notorious for trade shows, right? Sales, these a very in-person experience. We had some customers that actually have, representatives literally with offices at large corporations because their sole job is to maintain those relationships within those corporations. So, I think that there is a balance to be had, right, between, what our current conceptions are of what needs to be done and the jobs that can't go remote. And we may actually have to look a little bit deeper in that evaluation and say, well, is it actually impossible for this job to be a remote one? Because, in the future of an adaptive system, a machine, should be able to stop itself if a problem occurs. You might not necessarily need someone to stop that machine. Right. So, with that, building out a roadmap of technology that's like, okay, here's where we are today. Maybe it's, be able to describe the problem, or descriptive analytics tends to be like an easy way to move people remote, is like, now you can see things from somewhere else. Right. But then building the automated system, right, that actually creates that process optimization. Really, that's the next step that can maybe enable even more remote workforce into that future. And with that said, for both of you, and I'll respond later, but what roles specifically have we seen move remote? Do you have any experiences with current customers, for example, that you've worked with them directly to remove this role, or the pain points, right, that they've needed solved, and how have you helped them enable those?
Yeah, it's a great question, right? We work with a lot of clients who have multiple facilities spread throughout a wide geography. And in the past, you would need a champion at each of those facilities to ensure that the overarching maintenance philosophy and framework that is being implemented is being executed on in the right way. And what we did with this client is we've effectively enabled a single champion across several facilities, who now is able to view information about the metrics that are related to maintenance across all the facilities, check in with the ones that are performing well and understand what they're doing to achieve that great performance, and conversely check in with any of the underperformers to understand how they can provide additional support. In addition, this particular client, they have a lot of data that is available from their equipment, and they've actually been able to reduce the number of PMs that they perform, because now they're pulling in production related data, synchronizing that with Fiix, and triggering PMs based on actual utilization. So a very, very simple use case, but very, very powerful, because now you've got a champion across multiple sites who's able to have complete oversight over all of the pertinent metrics. And now you're also able to really streamline the overall operations that are occurring at those facilities. So a tremendous step forward when it comes to enabling remote capabilities.
What about you, Ben?
Yeah, I've got a lot to say here. So from my experience, and one of the nice things that I get to be a part of as a consultancy is we get to work with 80 different companies per year, and we get to see a lot of different cultures, and a lot of different setups, and a lot of different kind of operations. And one of the things that I see all the time is that people use a physical space as a crutch that is frankly just that: sales and marketing. Sales, there's an idea that we must bring people to this physical room in order to sell them. The fact of the matter is that sales team can probably up their game and do things remotely just fine. There are managers that feel like they need to put eyes on people physically in order to ensure that they're doing their work. Well, you're avoiding the root cause, which is, do you have the right, systems of accountability in place, for the organization? And so anyways, I think that there are a few roles that probably can't be fully remote. Outside of those few roles, I think that every role could probably transition to be partially remote, or to at least ask the question of, let's be more strategic about when I need to send people to the office. And there's a whole handful of positions that could just go fully remote, that ranges from management, leadership, anything that relates to software, a lot of like the new product development, or things that relate to new development, whether that's embedded or electrical firmware, mobile application, cloud architecture, monitoring, doing remote monitoring on these systems, or fleet of assets, or whatever it is. There's no reason why they can't go remote. So anyways, I did want to answer a question that Klaus had asked in the Zoom chat, because it's a great question, which I think kind of relates here. How do you onboard and train new people without offices and meeting places? It's a great question. And for us, we're now almost 9 years into this company, and we've had to go through this process of onboarding, and it comes down to process and tooling. And I'll give some very practical examples here. Number one for us is when we are first onboarding a new team member, we are equipping them before they start with all the gear that they need. And somebody can't just open up a laptop in their bedroom and be a best practitioner of remote work. Like it requires gear, and it requires planning. It requires, so we as a company pay for internet for all of our employees, and we have all of our people upgrade to the highest possible internet package that they can get to their house, right? We have a stipend for people actually setting up their office with a camera. We provide computers, we provide headsets, so there's like a gear component to this. What that enables people to do is then we use Zoom for all of our meetings, and we have a policy that the camera's always on. For every one of our meetings, cameras are on so that we can have face-to-face interactions. And a lot of companies that are just now starting to use Zoom, people are like joining the meeting but turning their camera off, because they're not in, their business attire, maybe still in their pajamas, whatever the case may be. So number one is we have people really think about creating a professional workspace. We always have the camera on. And then there's a pretty lengthy process that we go through on onboarding with Slack. So Slack, if you are a company and you use email, you should get rid of email and use Slack because it is simply a better tool. We stopped using email as a company maybe 5 years ago or something like that. It's just an awful collaboration tool. And Slack is a better system for communication, for collaboration. Slack, I would say, is the reason why we as a company can be remote. It's kind of like the nervous system. All of our tools from billing and accounting, through using Jira for project management, through GitHub, through alerts and notifications, through all the tools that we use for CI/CD, everything is integrated to Slack. And so a big part of our onboarding process is actually getting people up to speed, making sure they join all the channels. There are practice channels for the practice groups to talk about their craft. There's also, a doggies channel and several like water cooler channels, right? There's the channel where people talk about, we have a fitness challenge channel, right? Every month we have a fitness challenge as a company. We have an applause channel where we use an application called Bonusly, where we give money to everybody each month for them to give small tips, small bonuses to all of their fellow peers, right? So somebody steps in and helps you, you can send them $2 to $5 or whatever you choose. In our world, like a $5 Bonusly is like that's a big deal. It's usually like $1, $2, but the company provides, and that's like a user lose budget for people to acknowledge their peers. And so, our applause channel is a pretty active channel. We have all these different like water cooler and interest channels. The last thing is on the onboarding piece is we have a very particular work cadence that allows us to work effectively remotely. And that work cadence is weekly iteration planning meetings. So Monday morning, we do weekly iteration planning. And I can go into what those specific activities are, but more or less it's just setting up that work of week and people more or less making some commitments against a Jira board of tasks. We then do daily stand-ups, and that's the work cadence. And we try to keep really Tuesday through Thursday from our core working hours meeting free. So we put company meetings on Mondays or Fridays, and we keep the rest of the week pretty much meeting free outside of daily stand-ups or impromptu collaborative sessions that the teams, will need to do. But if you really want to unlock the value of remote work, it's let people do their work without distraction, right? And so that's the key thing to embrace. So anyways, happy to go deeper into onboarding, or we can get to some of the other questions.
Well, Ben, I think that's great. I think that a lot of what you just said, if you're a SaaS startup or a platform as a startup, right, and you have a technology-driven company, and a lot of what you just said, probably rings a lot of bells, but I think to be frank with you. Asking a manufacturer, right, to take all their operators, your maintenance teams, throw them on Slack, I think in some ways would probably create a bit of a culture shock that they wouldn't be ready for. So at least within my response to this question, I'd almost want to shift a little bit more back to, focusing on like how these tools can kind of start first by enabling the job to actually be done remotely. But Ben makes such a great point, right? Which is that, there's remote culture, and that's a huge component of this that we could almost talk about all day, how to enable a business culture to be remote. But I think really where it starts is how do you actually enable the job itself to be done remotely, right? And, some of the things that at Machine Metrics, we've really focused in on is looking at those pain points and saying, well, how does our solution enable certain factory workers to do this job either remotely, right, or in a social distance capacity, right? So I'm going to give you a couple examples. For us, you know, automate data collection is a no-brainer, right? You have machines, they produce thousands of data points every second, right? All of which say what's going on, what happened, and what's going to happen next, right? By being able to leverage a tool like machine metrics, for example, right, to automatically collect and capture that data, and then have that data flow into a cloud-based platform, like a machine metrics or an IoT platform, and automatically enables remote monitoring, right? And that remote monitoring in production is one of the first tasks that I see being really, really easy to move remote. An anecdote is that we have a shop owner who used to watch the St. Louis Cardinals all the time. RIP sports for those of you who are also sports fans like me, for now. But his wife actually, we were meeting with them one night. He used to spend all his day walking around the shop floor, asking people how the jobs were going, trying to get manual data from his machines. And I remember having this conversation with his wife actually, because she said, well, he used to always watch the Cardinals on TV, and now at home we have a huge dashboard, and it's displaying the factory in real time, and now it's not the Cardinals that's my problem. It's the factory dashboard. So, again, a funny anecdote, but the truth, right, is that when you have visibility into that type of data, jobs that require optimization of production standards, right? Taking a look at how many good parts you've made, scheduling decisions, right? Staffing decisions, all that data, for example, and for our customers, right, have been able to transition to remote work, right? So that's kind of number one. Remote communication is number two, and I don't mean Slack, but I literally mean, notifications, right? So pre-COVID times, when machines would go down on the lights out shift, for example, pre-machine metrics implementation, right? The machine would just be down, right? And someone would show up the next day and say, whoa, what happened? Why did the machine go down, right? But if you can enable like remote communications, such as, notification systems, texts, emails, letting the right person know at the right time what is happening, you can have one operator, not just managing one-to-one per machine, but one operator managing 4 machines, 6 machines at a time, right? And prioritizing certain alarms based on a history of downtime associated, right? So by being able to perform those analytics, by being able to have that information available in a remote capacity, you can build your own workflow systems that let the right people know at the right time what they need to do to create those priority schedules. But to the next level, right? That's just really like you go from descriptive to diagnostic, or even predicting maintenance events, right? But in reality, being able to take that data and analyze it from anywhere will give you the opportunities, for example, to build automated systems, right? So, sure, you could send a remote notification to someone saying, hey, an alarm indicating a severe error is happening on that machine, right? But if you have a socially distant shop floor and you have one factory worker working on 6 machines, their response time that, it might not be quick enough, right? So being able to synthesize that data into some sort of an algorithm, right, that, stops the machine, right, versus having or experiencing that severe cataclysmic, machine breakage, is something that can be implemented in a remote capacity by taking data, say, in a cloud and building an algorithm and then delivering that to an edge platform, like ours. So these, one of the other ones that we saw that was like an automatic game changer was, remote maintenance. And this is a perfect example that, systems, for example, like machine metrics and Fiix, I can only imagine vary because they build out these solutions, I'm sure, for their solution, for their providers also. You need to be able to have that data in real time, right? And you need to have it before a problem happens. You need to have it when a problem happened, right? And you need to be able to analyze that data so you can either reduce the time that that problem created, the associated downtimes with that problem, or stop that problem from happening, right? I think there's a roadmap to get there, all of which can be done remote by having some sort of IoT platform that can collect and push that data into a remote system. And then the applications of that data can then be either automated or delivered, through whatever mechanism you want. If it's through machine metrics, if it's through a Fiix, through a custom app that was built for you by Vary. So, with that, jobs on the shop floor, you're looking at, shop floor managers can easily do this, right, from home, right? A manufacturing engineer can look at machine data and take a CAM or a CAD model, put it up, test it on a machine or test it on a digital twin, pull that data in real time and see, is this efficacious? Are we able to do this? And you don't need to be on the shop floor to do those tasks. Does anyone else have any specific examples of actual users on the shop floor and use cases for them that they can do remote?
Yeah, I got a real simple one, and I think really feeds off or builds on what you just said, Graham. I think the foundation is the data, right? If you can get data from your assets, then the next question is, what can you do with that data? And being able to do something with that data is inevitably going to provide ways to streamline and create efficiencies. A great example is we've got a client. They've got several different facilities spread throughout the country. They have assets that are located in disparate locations. Ordinarily, it would be somebody's job literally to go out to each one of those assets and collect data points from that equipment. So things like run hours and other data. And what we've been able to do with that client is basically repurpose that particular role to do something more productive than spending an entire day going out to hundreds of equipment located across different geographical locations and simply capturing data. What we're doing is grabbing that data, pulling it in automatically, and now we're able to effectively take somebody out of the field and move them into a remote capacity. So, we haven't really touched on culture and all of the challenges that, manufacturers face in adopting digital tools and thus, tools that enable remote productivity. But, certainly, one of the key ones is, is simply starting small, right? Think big, start small. And I think the use case that, I just outlined, has a lot of value, creates a lot of value, but certainly very, very straightforward one, and it's enabled by technology that is easy to implement and set up today. So this is not something that is 5 years down the road. This is something that you can very literally out of the box turn on, which is what's exciting.
Yeah. I love that. And one of the other ones that I've at least seen, because we're getting a lot of questions on this coming in, is, a perfect example, something like work instructions, right? Sure, you could have somebody walk out to the machine, tell somebody else what to do, right? Show them how to do it. But it's not necessary because that type of knowledge, right, can be synthesized into, a video, a basic work instruction, a PDF, right? That then all you need is a trigger, right, to deliver that information to the right person, and immediately that task, right, has become automated, and you need half as many people, to do it. A good example, with the data collection, we see people walking all over the shop floors and collecting data, then input it into the ERP to do the scheduling. It's like, but if you can connect these systems, right, then you don't need to do that manual part of the process, right? It's already automated. Any other good use cases that you guys are finding on this front? Otherwise, I'll move on to another topic.
Yeah, I was just going to comment just to kind of go down the vein of culture. So what we've seen with clients when they come to us is 70% roughly of those clients have had a failed CMMS implementation in the past. And when we peel back the onion and we look at, okay, why did the project fail, and how do we avoid this from happening in the future? Really, two key areas drove the failed implementation. Number one was lack of management support. I think, given the current environment, given the shift and the emphasis on moving remote, I don't think that's going to be a problem as much any longer. The second component is end user adoption. When we talk to maintenance departments and operators and anybody on the shop floor, really, what they tell us is we just want the technology to get out of the way. We want to focus on doing our job, operating the equipment, fixing the equipment. And I think taking a very user-centric approach, and I say this for ourselves as a company, but I think the example applies, across any solution that gets implemented is, A, how does it make the life of the end user easier? And B, what is in it for the end user? When it comes to maintenance, what's in it for the end user is, instead of filling out paperwork for an hour at the end of the day, you tick a couple of boxes within the mobile app as you do your job. And at the end of the day, perhaps you go home, 30 minutes earlier. So when we think about, small, simple steps to drive adoption and create this culture, to me, and, again, this very much aligns to, our DNA as an organization is, how do we focus on what is best for the user, what is best for the employee? And from there, I think that's kind of the leading indicator to drive the outputs and the outcomes that we're all after. So, that's what we see. And, we've kind of paired that up with a emphasis on customer success. So, Graham has talked about this long-term journey. I think it was Aristotle who said, excellence is a habit, not an act. It's not a one-time event where, you deploy technology and you're done. The technology is very much a tool to enable, a much larger strategy. So that's kind of how we see it, and, kind of how we see our clients where they're most successful philosophically, where they ground themselves.
Sandy, making my day by bringing Aristotle into this. So glad to have you here. We're getting a couple questions about this, so I want to bring this up as maybe our final topic. We've identified, that there are great remote use cases for operators, right? For training, right? For maintenance, for service, right? The concern for many, right, is that when you go remote, there becomes a security risk, right? How do manufacturers, first of all, is this a misconception, right? Or is this a reality? And if it is so a reality, right, how do manufacturers address that?
I'll jump in here. So security is definitely an issue. It's not something to be glazed over, downplayed, especially when you have people doing work from their home, on their home network. And so we think about IoT security a lot. There are things that you can do that relate to implementing best practices, doing mutual device authentication where all of your devices out in the field have rolling certificates. There's a lot of work to be done there. On specifically the home network side, though, I think it's important you bring this up. We are working with a company called Zobi, and I'll drop their link here, because this device called a Hedgehog, which monitors your home network, is actually something that we're going to start including in our onboarding kit for all of our new employees. And more or less, it monitors your home network and all of your smart devices, and make sure that there are no bad actors, there's no data siphoning, there's nothing crazy going on. So I could spend a lot more time talking on this topic, but I guess to put a pin in it, it's definitely an issue. There are definitely best practices to follow, both from a systems architecture perspective and just like workplace, home network security.
Sandy, are any of your customers, experiencing a similar, concern about working from home?
Yeah, I think 100%, right? Anytime you take endpoints on the shop floor and you want to connect them to the internet, who's not going to have concerns about that, right? So I think there's two components, right? There's the technology and there's the culture. Obviously, the technology, architecturally needs to be secure. We feel like we've done that in a way that maintains a very high level of security, all the way from pen testing to SOC 2 compliance, to working with partners to really drive architectures that make sense in the world of IoT connectivity. And then culturally, how do we, now that everybody's got the workplace on their smartphone, on their laptop, and they're traveling with it, how do we ensure that people are taking the appropriate measures to protect that data and secure their devices, whether it be physically securing them or preventing things like phishing and so forth. So there's certainly many components that come into play. But I think what's great about the world of SaaS is, as individual organizations, you don't need to go and figure this out yourself. You have companies like us who have 3,000 paid customers. We are investing heavily as a result to ensure that our customers' data is secure. So you're basically getting the full investment that we make in security, rather than an organization having to go out and do that themselves. So that's kind of how we approach it. Yeah, Graham, I'll let you chime in from here.
Yeah, I mean, my only comment is, I think you're looking two different directions, right? You've got the provider, right, and then you have your culture. And I'll never forget. I was giving a discussion. I think it was a presentation at Aerodesk, and it was on why your fear of the cloud might be hiding a treasure trove of acceleration for your digital transformation, and cloud reticence is dramatic in aerospace. Yet the person who was presenting before me, who was the from one of the largest aerospace companies in the world, just left their USB in the computer right before I presented, right? So my point is, like, the cloud, right, has its own security concerns. That's why we partner with AWS. We're an industrial software competency partner, which means we adhere to the highest level of standards for their own products. But in the end, right, Equifax wasn't actually a technology breach. It actually was a manual breach, like a process breach that happened within that organization. So I think that you have to look at it from both directions. When you're moving home, you need to have good processes for everyone to follow, and you need to make sure that you align with the best in breed technology to assume that you keep your stuff safe. So with that, we're at 1 o'clock. We're hitting right against the thing. Typically at this point, I would give everybody just one final thought to walk away with. So if, for Sandy, Ben, if you've 10-second statement that everyone can walk away with from this, I urge you to give them that now, and then we will conclude. Ben, then Sandy.
Yeah, it's a worthwhile exercise to try to problem solve for moving a culture remote and moving people remotely. We check out our blog. We've got a lot of insights on things that we've tried and failed with.
All right, 1,000-mile journey begins with one step. And so I think when we're embracing remote, embracing technology, take the first step that's going to provide the most immediate value, and continue to evolve and iterate to ultimately achieve the end objective.
Yeah, I think automation and remote don't need to be mutually exclusive. In fact, I think they're highly intertwined. So I think when you look at both together as one, you may find that remote work isn't actually that far off after all for many of the jobs on the shop floor. Thank you all for joining us today. Really appreciate you all being here. Thanks, Ben. Thanks, Sandy. You guys have been awesome guests. We look forward to doing another one, and I hope you'll join us for our next webinar.
Thanks, everybody.
Appreciate it.
Have a great day.